I think the party ought to change the nominee because we're going to get killed with this nominee. And I have never said that. I waited till after the primary was over. I stayed Switzerland to the end, and the 72 hours dovetailed with that. They ought to get together and let the convention decide. And if Donald Trump pulls over a makeover in the next 4 to 5 weeks, great. They can keep him. It would be better if he had done so 5 weeks ago.
That prominent conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt saying it's time for the GOP to dump Trump. And if you think he's a lone voice out there, you're not listening closely enough. A long list of big-name Republicans. They're skipping the convention out of hand in Cleveland, and don't bother looking for them. It includes both President Bush's, Jeb Bush, 2008 GOP nominee John McCain, 2012 nominee Mitt Romney. Here are a dozen or so of other names as well that will not be in Ohio. And the two most powerful Republicans on Capitol Hill, Speaker Paul Ryan and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, have both strongly denounced Trump's comments about the judge in the Trump University case. That, of course, the Indiana-born judge that Trump keeps saying is Mexican. The Donald says he doesn't want to talk about it, but he was refusing to apologize. Republican Illinois Senator Mark Kirk, he's pulled his endorsement of the Donald. The question is, will more Republicans do the same? And I want to, Bill, separate what the morality or the ethics of it and just get to
pure politics?
The pure politics. I said it before. People said I was wrong. When Paul Ryan endorsed Trump, I got why, but I said huge mistake. Right. He has leverage if he doesn't. Anybody who has watched this with an unbiased eye says he can't go more than a week without doing something inflammatory.
Yeah.
He sends Manafort out to say, promise, after the primary or towards the end, he's going to be a real candidate. He'll get under the banner. He can't do it. And after I saw him read off a prompter in Briarcliff, where I know you were, he's not built for that either. In the end, if you read his book or you follow anything about the man's mantra is go with the gut. Right. His gut will always get in the gutter no matter what, and maybe that's his best chance to win. But he's going to bring the party down with it. So for me, is what I saw this past week only going to accelerate, or can Trump calm down the masses in the party where they'll hold their nose, and even if they lose in November, it's better to be with him than to be perceived with Hillary?
Yeah, just one half step back. I remember 3 years ago sitting where Richard is. I think Richard may have been where I am. And we were talking about the Republican Party rebranding to reach out to Latinos and to women.
Including, by the way, Trump in 2012.
You almost got to laugh as a Republican because crying hurts too much.
You've rebranded.
We have rebranded. We've rebranded. It's gone a different way. That said, and I was at the event. I went with a client on Tuesday, and I actually thought that was a good speech. I mean, I'm not a Trump guy, as you all know, but I thought that was a good speech. And I turned to the guy, if he could, I thought it was a very good speech. And I said, if he could stay on teleprompter, he could win. But then the next day he went out there and he said, I'm not going to stay on teleprompter. I think there's going to have to be, but yes, the conversation started again after the Mexican remarks, the judge remarks. And that conversation had pretty much died, that it was over. And it started again, but I think he's going to need to mess up one more time. And if he does, then I think it gets real, where you could actually have a floor fight. It won't win.
Any chance that in Cleveland, Andrew's going to get like pay-per-view TV in front of it where you'll have full-out dissension on the floor?
No. I think if this happens again,
if
it happens again, then it's
those delegates are Trump delegates. Look, let me see if I understand Paul Ryan's position. I'm endorsing him. He's going to build a wall. He's going to keep all Muslims out of the country. He's going to do all the wacky, all the wacky stuff he said he'd do. But I'm not, and I'm still going to endorse him even after he makes racist remarks. I think this gives you a sense, Bill, of where the Republicans are screwed.
Well, let me tell you,
you can't endorse him, and you can't not endorse him.
I agree with you, and that's why I jumped out of it. I think Ryan, whether you like him or not philosophically, he's a good man. He's trying to keep the party together, and he's got to be looking at the ceiling and praying to his God, whoever that is, to say what's the best move here in the long term, and he's eaten it as a result. He has eaten it, and he's a good man, and he deserves better than that.
For Hillary.
Yeah.
Politically, just from political capital where people got to figure out where they stand, is there a certain point that even a McCain, who has made his deal with the devil in this, says, this is stupid politics for me? I'm better off without this guy.
It's an easy threshold. Is he doing more harm to me than good? And the reason why Mark Kirk was the leading edge is because he's a Republican in very blue Illinois. He got elected in the Tea Party wave. And he's realized that Trump is going to harm him in his unlikely quest for re-election. McCain is facing a primary challenge right now, so he's got to get through that. But then in a general election, if he sees the numbers starting to work against him and he feels like Trump is a drag, he will jettison Trump, and so will a lot of other Republicans.
You guys may have seen this piece. You folks at home may have read it too. I thought it was a fantastic piece. Tom Friedman wrote it in the Times. It was called "Dump the GOP for a Grand New Party." I want to read a good chunk of it, and then I want to get the guys to respond here. And I'm going to paraphrase parts. Quote, "If a party could declare moral bankruptcy, today's Republican Party would be in Chapter 11. America needs a healthy two-party system. America needs a healthy center-right party to ensure that the Democrats remain a healthy center-left party. But this Republican Party is none of those things. It is just an empty shell, selling pieces of itself to the highest bidders, policy by policy. A little to the Tea Party over here, a little to big oil over there, a little to the gun lobby, to the anti-tax zealots, to climate change deniers, and before you know it, the party stands for an incoherent mess of ideas, unrelated to any theory of where the world is going or how America actually becomes a great again in the 21st century. And we know just how little they're attached to any principles, because today's Republican Party's elders have told us so, by, with a few notable exceptions, being so willing to throw their support behind a presidential candidate who they know is utterly ignorant of policy, has not done his homework, has engaged in racist attacks on a sitting judge, has mocked a disabled reporter, has impugned an entire religious community, and tossed off ignorant proposals for walls, for letting allies go it alone and go nuclear, and for overturning trade treaties, rules of war, and nuclear agreements in ways that will be wildly destabilizing if he took office. Despite that, all top GOP leaders say they will still support Donald Trump, even if he's dabbled in a, quote, textbook definition of racism, as House Speaker Paul Ryan described it. Because he will. He will sign off on their agenda and can do only limited damage given our checks and balances. Really? As Senator Lindsey Graham, I believe, rightly put it, as does Friedman, there has to be a time, quote, when the love of country will trump hatred of Hillary. John McCain, you didn't break under torture from the North Vietnamese, but your hunger for re-election is so great that you don't dare raise your voice against Trump. Marco Rubio, you called Trump a con man. He insults your very being and you still endorse him. Chris Christie, have you not an ounce of self-respect? You're serving as the valet to a man who claimed falsely that on 9/11 in New Jersey, in Jersey City, home of many Arab Americans, quote, thousands and thousands of people were cheering as that building was coming down. Christie is backing a man who made up a bold-faced lie about residents of his own state so that maybe he can be his vice president. Contemptible. He went on, but you know what? I believe we need two strong parties. You know, whatever I think of Trump, we don't want a party to have 400 House seats and 80 senators or whatever else. Not that that'll happen in November, Bill. But we keep talking about this every 4 years. It seems it's time to get a recheck and all the rest. The naked political opportunism to get behind something so reprehensible. At what point do you guys just say, we're better to lose than to win with this?
Well, I didn't like Friedman's piece. I liked half of it, not the other half. I thought it was two pieces. One piece he was completely right on, where he said you have people selling out because this guy's the nominee. I agree with that. And I think that's what's going to destroy the party. The other piece is I read as him saying if only Republicans were more like Democrats ideologically, you'd have a great new party. And that I disagree with.
Me personally, I didn't read it that way, but I
anti-tax
hear
zealots, this kind of thing. That I had a problem with. But on the other side, absolutely. Especially John McCain. I've got to say, I find it incredibly disappointing that John McCain, who I'm a big admirer of, and I've disagreed with him over the years. He's lost me a little bit. But here is a guy who went through an enormous amount for this country, and the fact that he's willing to trade his dignity, as I see it, to get one last re-election in the Senate, to me is a mark that he'll never get off of him.
Bill's wrong here. He's right about the Friedman piece having two parts, but he's profoundly wrong. If the alternative to a bizarre loudmouth is Paul Ryan, then what you're trying to force down the country is a failed economic policy, austerity.
I don't think it's failed. We disagree on that. We can
failed
disagree all year.
Across the entire world.
It has not. It's not.
It's failed in Europe. It's failed in the United States. It's failed in Kansas. It's failing in Oklahoma.
But now you're litigating a political debate over economic fiscal policy, which is fine. But this is a more naked, clean choice to make. Someone that you have said, Ryan said, it meets the definition of racism. Other people said that as well. But yet in the second voice, he's not Hillary. That can't be enough. Listen, whatever you say, if a candidate I liked was doing this, I couldn't support the person. And even if politically, maybe I'm being Pollyannish here, I'm surprised people I respect can.
I think we've touched on this in one form or another over the years, whether it's talking about a government shutdown or whether it's talking about torture of torture of prisoners, or whatever the story happens to be, where you see people sort of swallowing what is their inherent position for the sake of political gain. And I think it's the movement of the Republican base to the conservative talk radio sphere that we've seen really since the early 90s. And I think a lot of Republicans are put in a position where they have to swallow positions that they find abhorrent or objectionable because that's where their voters are. And their voters have been worked into such a lather by talk radio that the politicians have moved to where that noise is coming from, and they haven't figured out a way to combat it. How many times did we hear people not able to stand up to Rush Limbaugh right at the beginning of the Obama administration, or not able to stand up to Glenn Beck, and saying one thing and then going back on their air and cowering to them a little bit later? It's not because they were afraid of Beck or Limbaugh, it's because they're afraid that that's where their voters are now. And you can't get to the general without
I
facing
just want
those
to
voters.
insist on this one point. If you think the Republican Party isn't collapsed because of the personality of Donald Trump, you're wrong. That's been the straw that broke the camel's back. But the hard right-wing ideology, the guns, the women's stuff, the economic policy,
Rich,
the
they got a
civil rights
majority in
stuff.
the Senate and the House.
If Rubio was the candidate right now against Hillary Clinton, wouldn't you be nervous? Wouldn't you? It's same policies, more to
was
the
nervous
right.
2 weeks ago.
Rubio's to the right of Trump. He's to the
Because
right of
you
Trump.
can't win with that ideological.
course you can.
All
Even
I'll
with
say
a
is,
polite guy.
Richard, all I'll say is they got the majority in the House and the Senate. I know where the polls are. I know where everything else is. It is, though, Trump that, I think, in my view, this has made it so naked and overt as to where are people's lines. And where I thought people's lines were, I've been wrong about. To be continued. All right, coming up next here, closer to home, Preet Bharara strikes again. This time, the prosecutors got a fraud case against Norman Seabrook. He is the head of the City Correction Officers Union. The question is Bharara going to stop there, or should we, as we say, stay tuned for more arrests?